Well, thank you, Professor Pollack and Professor Lee, for your outstanding and very thorough presentation, both of which dealt a lot with a historical overview. I think it was Mark Twain that said, the past does not repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes. So historical context is definitely helpful and important. I only have a few minutes to comment both presentations, so let me first just comment on Professor Pollack's last concluding remark and then say a few words on Professor Lee's presentation. In his concluding remarks, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you said that for us to really fully grasp the dangers of nuclear armed North Korea, that we must first have a fuller understanding of the North Korean system and and how its leaders conceptualize their long-term intentions, goals, and objectives. Absolutely. But let me just add to that one point that perhaps our problem with North Korea is not necessarily the lack of understanding of their objectives and goals and intentions, but also just the way the North Korean system, or Kim Jong-il in particular, how his strategic outlook itself is a fundamental barrier in terms of us making a sustained progress with North Korea. The North's objectives, be it whether it's trying to secure tacit U.S. and international acceptance of their retention of nuclear weapons, or to enhance North Korea or Kim Jong-un's status at the expense of South Korea's, or to erode both substantively and symbolically the U.S.-South Korean alliance, or trying to gain de facto acceptance, U.S. acceptance of a North Korean system the way it is, or to position Pyongyang in a way that so you can exact more concessions from regional actors. The list goes on in terms of their objectives. The bottom line is these objectives are fundamentally at odds with making progress with the U.S. or having a positive relationship with the U.S. Much of what Kim Jong-il seeks, I believe, in terms of seeking better relations with Washington is with just the engagement process. So, in other words, instead of trying to really reach a broad or real détente with Washington. So in a way, they're looking for what matters more to them is the journey rather than the final destination. And I believe that probably from in Kim Jong-il's calculus, trying to reach a real, genuine, broad détente with Washington has real risk. It erodes, fundamentally erodes and weakens the core ideological pillars of the regime, such as portraying the imperialist U.S. that poses existential threat to North Korea, or portraying South Korea as colony of the U.S. These things are part of North Korean historical narrative, and they have used it to justify their priorities and policies that restricts political rights and retards economic development. So I guess the question that I threw out there is, in addition to trying to fully understand where North Koreans, the objectives, the system, past, present, and future, what do we do about their own strategic outlook and mindset? I think there's many scholars and analysts alike. I mean, it is a little doubt that Pyongyang is highly unlikely to abandon nuclear weapons program without a fundamental reorientation of its strategic outlook. So how do we get them to switch their own strategic mindset? I guess that's the question. In terms of Professor Lee's presentation, I think in the paper, I read his paper, he didn't get to really argue it as passionately, he ran out of his time. But in the paper, he really passionately argues for how it behooves us to meticulously plan for contingency planning in North Korea. And lack of such planning would create, I'm trying to use your words, would pose a significant threat for regional stability and whatnot. The problem is, and I agree with that, I can agree with more with that point, but the issue is, in addition to a individual planning that we have to do a joint planning with regional actors, China, South Korea, Russia, and Japan. And of course, the problem is, China in particular, shall we say, is less than enthusiastic about doing any kind of prior joint planning with the U.S., probably out of fear that it would somehow symbolize, it would show them tacitly approving U.S. intervention in North Korea, or somehow it would look like it approves the U.S. Seeking regime change, or it doesn't want to annoy Pyongyang because North Koreans will find out that if you are doing a prior joint planning. But the problem is, without a prior joint planning with regional actors, when a crisis occurs in North Korea, it would impede, the lack of prior planning would impede a prompt, effective, multilateral response should a collapse occur. I think Professor Lee also makes an excellent point about regional actors, particularly China, how it has little reasons to be concerned about a unified Korea under the South Korean Authority. And I absolutely agree with that. And I do think that China, while its top concern obviously is the stability on the peninsula and sort of creating a strategic environment that's favorable to Chinese interests, I think if a collapse scenario was to occur, and if China see it as an not reversible, that a collapse is happening, I think then China and other regional actors would not want to be on the wrong side of the history on this and would support a unified Korea under the South Korean Authority. I have more to say, but I think I ran out of time too. But why don't we just end there and then take questions?